bars and stripes. Dumpster fire vibe. Come on. All American why? All American why? All American why? Ask yourself the American why.
Hello, excessive thinkers. Welcome back to All American Why, the podcast where we ask questions that people avoid, then act surprised when the answers explain everything. As the United States approaches 250 years since its founding, there is a question we need to stop pretending is controversial. The question is, why don't Americans acknowledge that Black history is American history, and how can we change that? Here's the truth. Black history is still treated like an elective, a special topic, a side unit you can visit in February and quietly leave behind the rest of the year. But the reality is that Black history is not supplemental to the American story. It is the structure holding the whole thing together. You simply cannot understand the United States without understanding Black life in it. Not the economy, not housing, not labor, not culture, not law, not innovation, not voting, not wealth, and not who is protected and who is disposable. And if that makes people uncomfortable, that is not a reason to stop. That is a sign that we're finally being accurate. Black History Month didn't begin as a celebration. It began as a correction. In 1926, Carter G. Woodson, a Harvard-trained historian and the son of formerly enslaved parents, launched what was then called Negro History Week. He did it because American schools were erasing Black people entirely or presenting them only as problems instead of contributors. Woodson believed history shaped self-worth and political power. He warned, and I quote, "Those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from the teaching of biography and history." February was not random either. Black communities were already honoring Frederick, a formerly enslaved writer and orator who forced the nation to confront slavery with words and logic, and Abraham Lincoln, whose presidency marked emancipation, imperfect as it was. By 1976, during the bicentennial, President Gerald formally recognized Black History Month nationally. That timing matters. Black History Month exists because the country was not telling the truth about itself. For more than half of America's 250 years, slavery was not a moral failure on the margins. It was a central economic system. Enslaved Black people generated enormous wealth through agriculture, construction, skilled trades, and infrastructure. Cotton alone became one of the most valuable commodities in the world, fueling banks, insurance companies, railroads, and universities that all still exist today. That wealth did not disappear after emancipation. It was inherited, not by those who did the work. Freedom did not arrive cleanly. It arrived into systems designed to maintain control. Convict leasing, sharecropping, terror campaigns, voter suppression, which leads directly to Jim Crow. Jim Crow was not just prejudice, it was the law. It dictated where Black people could live, learn, work, vote, and exist, enforced by violence. When those laws began to fall, federal housing policy stepped in. Redlining in the 1930s explicitly marked Black neighborhoods as risky for investment. Mortgages were denied, capital dried up, families were locked out of home ownership. Home ownership is the primary engine of generational wealth in the United States. Redlining did not just deny housing, it denied inheritance. This is not ideology, these are facts. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968 dismantled legal segregation and voter suppression. But as you may know, laws change faster than systems. Systems change faster than culture. As James Baldwin, one of America's sharpest observers of race and power, put it, history is not the past, it is the present. We carry our history with us. Black history is often taught as suffering plus civil rights. What gets erased is innovation. Enslaved Africans brought advanced agricultural knowledge, especially rice cultivation techniques from West Africa, that made entire regional economies in the Carolinas possible. George Washington Carver, born into slavery, became one of the most influential agricultural scientists in United States history. He promoted crop rotation, soil conservation, and sustainable farming practices that transformed Southern agriculture after cotton had depleted the land. Henry Blair, one of the first Black Americans to receive a United States patent, created seed and cotton planters that increased efficiency and crop yields at a time when agriculture drove the economy. Norbert Rouleau revolutionized sugar refining with the multiple effect evaporator, making production safer, cheaper, and more efficient. That technology is actually still used in industrial processes today. Jan Ernst Matzelager automated shoe manufacturing, transforming shoes from luxury goods into affordable necessities for working Americans. Garrett Morgan invented early gas masks and traffic signal systems, saving lives and shaping modern public safety. This is not inspirational trivia. This is American infrastructure. A lot of people listening will have not heard these names or know about these people, which is surprising but not surprising. We can also talk about rock and roll. Rock and roll did not appear out of nowhere. It grew out of Black musical traditions like blues, gospel, rhythm and blues. Artists like Sister Rosetta Tharpe, a gospel singer and electric guitarist, were performing the sound of rock decades before the genre was marketed through white performers. America took Black innovation, filtered it through white acceptability, and sold it back as American culture. Let me say that one more time. America took Black innovation, filtered it through white acceptability, and sold it back as American culture. That pattern repeats everywhere. There are people who will say they do not like Black people, but they love Beyoncé. They'll defend her, quote her, buy the tickets. Or they'll say they're uncomfortable around Black people, but their favorite athlete is Black. They'll say, I don't mean those Black people. That is not progress or progress at all. That is compartmentalization. Black excellence gets celebrated. Black humanity gets conditional acceptance. People also love to say, well, we had a Black president, so racism must be over. That is absurd. Yes, Barack Obama reshaped what many Americans thought was possible, but Black people are held to higher standards. Obama had to be calm, impeccable, and unflappable, and one of the biggest controversies of his presidency was him wearing a tan suit. Not corruption, not war, a tan suit. We also flattened Black history when we reduced people to single acts. Harriet Tubman, for example, was not just an escaped enslaved woman who helped others flee. She was a military strategist, a Union Army scout and spy, a nurse, and a leader. She helped plan and lead the Combahee River Raid, freeing hundreds of enslaved people. This is not just legend, this is military history. The film Hidden Figures also is important to talk about. It tells the story of Black women mathematicians and engineers at NASA whose calculations made spaceflight possible. They helped put Americans in space while being segregated on Earth. I'll also repeat that. They helped put Americans in space while being segregated on Earth. Black brilliance powered national pride. Black people were treated as second-class citizens. That contradiction is structural, not accidental. Black thinkers have been explaining this system for generations. Audre Lorde gave us language to understand why pretending differences do not matter preserves inequality. She warned that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Angela Davis connected slavery, policing, prisons, and capitalism into one continuous system. Bell Hooks insisted education should be transformative, not comfortable. Ida B. Wells used investigative reporting to expose lynching as a tool of racial control, not random violence. These were not fringe voices. They were explaining America to itself. Black Lives Matter emerged in 2013 after the killing of Trayvon Martin. It was not a moment, it was a continuation of a centuries-long fight over whose lives are protected and whose pain is dismissed. Now let's talk about where we are today. We live in a country where segregation is illegal, but neighborhoods remain divided. Where voting rights technically exist, but access is constantly contested. Where Black culture is celebrated, but Black history is politicized. Where people say they believe in equality as long as it does not require them to learn anything new or question anything old. And this is usually where the question comes up. Why is there a Black History Month and not White History Month? The answer is actually very simple, because every day already centers white history. The default story of America focuses on white experiences, white leaders, white culture, and white perspectives. Black History Month exists because Black history was excluded from that story. Also, asking why there's no White History Month misses the point and proves why Black History Month is needed. The same logic applies when straight people ask, why is there a Pride Month or Pride events, but no Straight Month? When your identity is already treated as normal, visible, and protected, you don't need a special month to fight erasure. Pride exists because LGBTQIA+ folks were told to be quiet, invisible, or ashamed. Black History Month exists for the same reason. These are not celebrations of exclusion, they are corrections to it. So where does that leave us? We are at a crossroads. We can keep teaching a partial story that makes some people comfortable and leaves others confused, angry, and invisible. Or we can tell the full story and finally understand why our country looks the way it does. Because when Black history is treated as separate, Black citizenship stays conditional. When Black history is treated as central, America becomes legible. This is all American why, and today's question, like some others, are simple but hard. Why don't some Americans acknowledge that Black history is American history, and how can we change that? We change it by telling the truth until it feels normal, and by continuing even when people say it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. Because you know what is actually uncomfortable and inconvenient? Being followed in stores because someone decided you look suspicious. Being pulled over and wondering whether this is a ticket or the last conversation you'll ever have. Being taught how to survive an encounter instead of how to expect safety. Being murdered in your own home, in your car, in the street, while jogging, while sleeping, while simply existing. Being told to stay calm, be polite, do not move too fast, do not speak too loudly, or do not speak at all. Being overqualified for jobs and still overlooked. Being underpaid and then blamed for it. Being told your pain is exaggerated, your anger is threatening, and your history is divisive. Being asked to prove your humanity again and again to people who have never had to do it even once. That is uncomfortable. That is inconvenient. Talking and teaching about history, the real history, is not the harm. The harm is what happened and what keeps happening, whether we talk about it or not. Discomfort is not oppression. Learning is not punishment. And telling the truth is not an attack. It is the bare minimum.
Hi there, Kevin Cook here, aka Poison Waters. The question is, why don't most Americans acknowledge Black history? Because it doesn't make most folks look good. In the end, people don't want to acknowledge anything negative or anything bad or anything that doesn't put themselves or their people in a bad light. The question is, what is it like to be a Black person in America in 2026, and what should non-Black people understand? It is undescribable, literally, and sometimes unfathomable to be existing right now as a Black person in 2026. What Black folks are going through is individualized, and that's something that non-Black folks need to understand, is that we're not cookie cutter. Every Black person is not the same. We all feel and think differently, but we're all struggling. A lot of us come off strong, but we're really inside afraid. We're really inside pissed off. We're really inside struggling to maintain day-to-day behaviors and activities without completely breaking down. Another thing non-Black folks should understand is, while we appreciate allyship, we do not need non-Black folks to speak for us. We do not need non-Black folks to imagine themselves in our shoes, because they just can't.
When we ask why Black history isn't fully acknowledged as American history, we have to look at who has traditionally controlled the narrative. For centuries, generations, this country has operated within a system where white dominance shaped how our story has been told. And when your identity and sense of superiority are tied to being seen as the primary builders of the nation, it becomes uncomfortable to fully acknowledge the role Black Americans played in building, shaping, and advancing this country. Because telling the full truth doesn't just highlight Black excellence and contribution, it also requires confronting injustice, exploitation, and the systems that created the inequality, right? So that kind of honesty brings a lot of discomfort and sometimes even fear, the fear around the concern that if historically marginalized communities gain influence, the same thing that they've done to us in the past, we would turn around and do to them. And that fear can make people resistant to recognition and change. But growth starts with telling the truth. Black history isn't separate from American history. It is American history. It's in our labor, our culture, our innovation, and our fight to make this country live up to what's supposed to be its ideals. But the way we change this is simple. Tell this full story all year without minimizing it, without separating it. Because when we tell the truth about our history, we create the possibility for a more honest, just, and unified future.
The ways that we have taught Black history in America varies so much across time, culture, and space that it's really a roll of the dice as to how much you actually get to learn. But regardless of where you learned Black history, there is always some degree of emphasis placed on the otherness of Black Americans when talking about our history. Some of that is just the nature of how the United States was built and how Blackness has always been constructed as an other used to define whiteness. Some of it is this tendency of non-Black people to continue to cast us as an other, to be addressed or invoked when talking about lack of freedom and agency, and in few other cases. I think integrating Black history into the broader historical narrative of the United States of America starts with giving more resources to those who research, write, and present Black history. It's also important that those who create mass media employ Black knowledge workers to make sure that we are included or represented, and most importantly, that we appear as main and incidental characters. It's incumbent on the people who tell the story of this country to allow for Black people to appear in their narratives naturally. I think that it's also every American's responsibility to make it a point to consume and venerate Black literature, film, television, and other media that tell the stories of Black Americans. We were here before the United States of America came into existence. We helped build this country, and for better or worse, this will always be our home. My name is Milo Reed. I'm a historian who lives and works in Portland, Oregon.
Well, we've reached the end of this episode of All American Why. If you made it this far, congratulations. You're officially an excessive thinker too. If something today made you laugh, cringe, or reconsider everything you thought you understood about this country, good. That's the point. Subscribe, rate, review, and share All American Why wherever you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. Or don't. It's still a free country for now. You can find me, Michael Jonas, on social media or at allamericanwhy.com, where we're building community for people who still give a damn. All American Why is filmed and recorded at X-Ray.FM Studios in North Portland, Oregon. Original music by Renezra and Views. Audio editing by Kyle Gilmore of Residual Audio. Until next time, keep your curiosity loud, your optimism spiteful, and your democracy under constant surveillance. This is All American Why. Thanks for listening.
All American why? All American why? All American why? Ask yourself the American why.